we're going to go on the record in Bonneville County Case 2022-710, State of Idaho versus Shane Alan Cady. Mr. Cady is present, along with counsel Mr. Gustavus. The State of Idaho is present and represented by Mr. Harris. Today for scheduled sentencing. Ready to proceed in this matter, Mr. Gustavus?
Yes, Your Honor.
Stay ready, Mr. Harris.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Cady, let me review the history of this case. You had an arraignment on this matter on July 25th, 2023, where you were informed that information had been filed against you by the State of Idaho, charging you with the crime of lewd conduct to the minor. You pled not guilty on that date. However, ultimately on May 15, 2024, you were found guilty at trial of the charge of lewd conduct with a minor. After the finding of guilt by a jury of your peers under the pre-sentence investigation report, along with the psychosexual evaluation, I have carefully reviewed that report. A copy has also been provided to your attorney. So let me first ask Mr. Cady, you had a chance to review that pre-sentence investigation report?
Yes.
Mr. Gustavus, are there any parts of that report that need to be clarified or corrected?
No, Your Honor.
Are there going to be any witnesses on behalf of the defendant?
No, Your Honor.
Any witnesses or victim impact statement by the state?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, you may go ahead with the victim impact statements or witnesses.
Thank you.
Either sit or stand. Sitting's fine.
Yeah, is that okay?
Yep. If you can tell me your full name for the record as well as spell your last name. I understand you'll be making victim impact statement, is that correct?
Yes.
And is it written or?
I'm just going to read a portion of
Please
what
do.
I've submitted already.
All right, if you can make sure you move that microphone just a little closer, we can make sure we're recording this both digitally as well as the court recorder is going there. Go ahead, Mr. DeVore.
Just wanted to write this. This whole thing has been one of the hardest things our family's ever had to go through. To see your daughter go through this and suffer the way she did, and then to come forward. I'm proud of her for that. Hurt that she had to experience these things and had to go through this. It's kind of beyond words what happened. I've known Shane. I've known him for 12 years. Basically, he was a friend of the family, a brother, as you could say. But to have this happen, I just, our family, I just feel very violated. Our trust now with other people and especially other men that come around the house we're very skeptical of them. We don't want to trust them, and that's been a direct result of this happening to her. Other than that, I hope for Mr. Cady's sake that he is able to get the help that he needs to, I guess, take responsibility for his actions, and I hope our family can move on from this. Super strong, and I think this coming to a closure is gonna help her tremendously. And that's all.
Thank you, Mr. DeVore. Appreciate that. Mr. Harris, any other victim impact statements?
Yes, Your Honor.
Once again, if you could say your full name and spell your last name.
Like my husband said, this whole ordeal has been really traumatic. Obviously but for my entire family as well. I have 5 other children. I feel like Shane took advantage of our kindness, because we always welcomed him into our home. And after the reality of what happened had settled in, I felt like my kindness became my weakness, because if I hadn't been so kind, maybe none of this would happen. And I had to struggle with the guilt as her mom and shame that how could I have been so stupid and naive and so trusting that I couldn't protect her from this happening. And it ruined my trust. Everybody that we met became a potential threat. I couldn't even let my brother-in-law or my nephew, who helped raise, stay the night in our home anymore. They had to get hotels. And having to watch my daughter, who was already struggling with just normal teenage emotions and hormones, now struggle with this and PTSD. Waking up from nightmares, shaking and screaming, and I couldn't hold her because not only did she want not just any male to touch her, she didn't want anybody to touch her at all, so I couldn't even comfort my own daughter. It even tainted going to say goodbye to my father, who was dying of cancer. It even ruined such a private moment when my dad reached out to Tiffany to try to hug her, and she stiffened up and pulled away. And that was a direct result of because of what happened. And watching all my kids suffer in different ways with guilt of maybe if I would have been home, or my oldest daughter told me maybe if I wouldn't have been acting out, maybe none of this would have happened. And even my younger ones, who are now 13 and 14, still extremely scared of the dark. And my 13-year-old now has facial tics because of high anxiety and still won't sleep in the bedroom or in the bed by herself. She has to sleep with her little sister because she's so terrified that a man is going to be under her bed. And even my youngest daughter, who is autistic, showed a lot of regression because autistic children need a lot of structure. And when this happened, it sent everything into a tailspin. And structure and routine kind of got thrown out the window as we tried to grapple with everything. I struggle at school, where she would call me crying from the bathroom, and it got so bad we ended up having to put a 504 in place at school and having safe words. If she had a teacher that was male, she had one teacher that resembled Shane, she couldn't handle it. Anybody even looked like him at work, she'd get physically ill. She missed so much school. She pushed friends away. She pushed family away. It's been very hard watching her try to find the right therapist to open up to. I just hope that he gets the maximum sentence, just because he doesn't take any accountability for any of his actions or show any remorse. I just think that if given a chance, he will do so again, especially because he doesn't think he did anything wrong. So I pray that he does get the help that he needs. But he took my daughter's innocence, and I'm so proud of him. Our roles kind of reversed at the end of May. So I was struggling really hard because I've become very overprotective of all of my kids and even their friends, wanting to just save everybody, and it got to be just too much. And she just told me, Mom, you do so much for all of us in trying to help us, but maybe it's time you talk to somebody too, because it's not your fault. I'm just so proud of her. So I just want him to be accountable for his actions, and just above all just deserves that justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate those comments. Mr. Harris, any other witnesses or anything to say?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Moore, you want to come forward? If you want to just say your name, we've spelled it now twice, so just go ahead. All right, go ahead.
I'm not really sure where to begin with the situation and how it has affected me. I've struggled with trying to understand that none of what has happened was my fault. When it all first happened, I felt like pieces of me were stolen. My innocence and my self-worth. My self-worth was destroyed in those moments, and almost 3 years later, I'm still trying to repair something I didn't break. I feel like I can't talk to anybody about it because they can never understand how I'm feeling. Everyone tells me that I survived, and I did, but at what cost? My friendships with the people I'm close with were affected so severely, it's hard for me to be around them anymore. My relationship with people in my own family were also affected. My relationship with my siblings, I pushed them away from me during this time, and I still feel bad about it because I didn't do anything to deserve that. It's hard for me to hug my own father, grandfather, and uncles because all I can feel are his hands on me. As much as I want to be able to talk to my mother and father about what's happened, it's just too hard for me because the looks on their faces kill me inside. It hurts that my parents feel like they are the ones who should take the blame for this. A home is where you're supposed to feel safe, but because a situation occurred in my home, I no longer have that sense of security there. I struggled a lot with being able to sleep peacefully at night because I'll have nightmares about it that wake me up throughout the night. During the time this occurred, I was only 13 years old. I didn't tell anyone for almost a month what had happened to me. I was scared people wouldn't believe me. I was also about to start 8th grade, and I had been so excited I didn't want anything to get in the way of ruining my school year. School in general, since this has happened, has been extremely difficult for me. My grades suffer due to my mental health. I missed many days of school because I had become so depressed it was difficult for me to even get out of bed. And while at school, all I could think about was what had happened, and I would have to leave class often to calm myself down. I still struggle with this to this day. I had felt so lost and alone after it happened, I resorted to coping mechanisms that were hurting my own body. I remember during the moments while it was happening, I so badly wanted to scream, kick, or do something to stop it, but my body and my mind were so frozen with fear and confusion I couldn't speak or move. This man had been such a close person to me at the time, and to figure out he had only been wanting to become close to me to do those things to me really hurt me. I felt so betrayed and used. I felt disgusting after it happened. I can still remember showering afterwards and trying so hard to scrub his hands off me. My relationship with God and my religion were wounded. I had and have a hard time going to church after it happened because I just didn't understand why what happened to me had to happen to me. A few people at school and at other schools had found out what had happened to me, and I would have strangers calling me and asking me what happened to me. Having random strangers call you and asking about something so traumatic that happened to you is traumatic itself. Because I felt like now only everyone knew me for one thing, and for a while I had let that define me. So sometimes it feels like that's the only thing that does define me. Another thing that was hard was having to go on stand in front of strangers and go into detail about what happened. I felt so vulnerable and wanted to cry the whole time, but I also didn't want to express my emotion in the fear that I might mess something up. It was also so difficult not being able to have my own mom in the courtroom during one of my court dates. But it was also hard when both of my parents were in the room. Because it felt so much harder to talk about what had happened to me with them there, because even they didn't know every single detail until I went up on stand. The looks in their faces as I would have to go into excruciating detail each night of what he did to me made me want to cry. I look back on what happened to me during that time to remember that I was only a child and he was a grown man. I was taken advantage of and used. After it happened, I had a feeling that I just needed to grow up faster so the trauma would maybe be easier to deal with if I had had the mindset of an adult. I wouldn't wish this upon anyone. It is truly so traumatic. It is something I have to deal with for the rest of my life. Because someday I might be able to heal from this, but I will never forget. And my 13-year-old self will always be in the back of my mind from when I would lay on my bedroom floor crying and screaming into pillows. Or from when I would be crying in the bathroom at school because I had kids asking me what happened. Or from when the boys in my grade would text me asking if it felt good. Those are just a small portion of everything I was feeling, had, and have to go through, and it was horrible. It is weird to think that my entire life was altered in the span of a few minutes. Writing this paper was even hard because it still affects me sometimes in ways I don't even know yet until it's happening. I also feel like what if I'm saying isn't enough. The amount of stress all this has caused me is insane. I feel like I have to walk on eggshells around myself. I have to watch what I do, what conversation I choose to listen in on or be a part of because it sometimes still triggers me. Overall, the pain I suffered is irreversible, but I hope one day to heal from it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate those comments. Anything else, Mr. Harris?
No, Your Honor, no further victim impact statements.
All right. Before I now sensitive this matter, then, Mr. Gustavus, I'll let you argue on your client's behalf.
Thank you, Your Honor. This matter went to trial, proceeded through 3 days of trial. There was a conviction at trial. Mr. Cady has submitted to a pre-sentence investigation as required and other evaluations as ordered by this court. Those have been filed and pursuant to Mr. Cady's review. We have no objections to that PSI, which we've already addressed. In discussion with Mr. Cady, he wishes me to submit to the court on the record that has been presented to the court and not to make any argument or of mitigation or recommendation to this court. Defense counsel is prepared to proceed and address those issues. However, at client's request, we submit to the court for its discretion. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Cady, the court wants to ask you a couple of questions just to make sure you understand your rights. All right, I'm not trying to incriminate you in any way on this. You understand that you have the right to have your attorney represent you at this hearing and to argue on your behalf. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You understand that that argument could contain mitigating factors, things that the court, even though I've had access to these reports, that your counsel could present argument in such a way that would in fact mitigate the sentence and make it lighter for you. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You understand that your attorney can still argue on your behalf and you can still maintain your innocence.
Yes.
However, it's also my understanding, based on what your attorney just said, that you have instructed him that you do not want him to do that. Is that correct?
True.
And that even after this conversation now and with understanding this, that's still how you want to proceed today,
Yes.
is to not have him make any argument on your behalf.
Yes.
All right, I need to ask some questions of your attorney as well at this point, and then I may come back to you depending on what those answers might be, okay? Mr. Gustavus, you understand that you can, well, do you understand all the questions I ask of your client?
Yes, Your Honor.
You understand that you can still present argument even though he has asked you not to,
I understand that.
and that you're making that decision after consulting with him and as well as considering your own ethical obligations and considering this in the best way to proceed.
Yes, Your Honor.
So it's you're going to waive any mitigating, any argument as to your client's behalf,
Yes, Your Honor.
okay? Mr. Cady, do you have any questions or concerns about anything that your attorney said or that the court has asked you of today?
No.
And it's my understanding you wish to waive any mitigation argument and just have the state argue and the court pronounce sentence. Is that how you want to proceed today?
Yes.
Even though you understand you have the right to do all of those things.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Gustavus?
No, Your Honor, I have calculated 100 days of credit for time served.
Did you say 100 days?
100, yes.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Mr. Harris, pronounce sentence, so let's the state argue its position.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I'll begin with a thought. Each time I read the reports in this case, I considered the words of a singer, songwriter, political satirist, Phil Collins, as he was on the verge of losing his fourth wife. He said, I started to think, maybe it's me. At some point, when you deal with a lot of disappointment in life, you have to kind of figure out what your involvement in that disappointment could be. We've heard the victim statements, and I can't say any more than they have said. The reality is they're left thinking, what could I have done? What was my part that I played in this terrible event? And I note that as I read the pre-sentence investigation, that under the defendant's version, he stated that in 2000 he had an ex-wife that was mad, made a report to get him in trouble. In 2004, he was getting stolen property, but he didn't have permission to be on the property to recover his property. By 2012, he was accused of abuse. There was no evidence. And then 2018, an ex-girlfriend assaulted him. He called the police, but he was blamed. So it seems that theoretically a lot of things happen, but they're never his fault. I noted that when I reviewed a little deeper, that Mr. Cady has been twice divorced. A third long-term relationship ended. Those relationships resulted in 3 children that he has no contact with at this point. And in reviewing his write-ups on those are also the results of drug users and junkies and not his fault. The defendant served in the U.S. Marine Corps, but was court-martialed and dishonorably discharged. And I'm sure at this point that was also not his fault. To the PSI interviewer, there were reports of bias by the judge and a jury of 12 strangers. Obviously, again, someone else's fault. It makes it difficult to some extent, to deal with the case and the recommendation, because as I read the psychosexual evaluation, it was, I'll say relatively, under the circumstances, relatively favorable. Moderate risk to reoffend at worst. But that can't even be believed. Because again, you've got a defendant who, for whatever misdeeds or downfalls he has faced, it's always someone else's fault. Let's see. I have a lot of other things I could say, but the reality is I don't know that there's a lot of value in those, because again, there's the problem with there's a certain degree of honesty that I believe was lacking in the PSI report. And I would say it's the worst type of dishonesty. We see defendants in here come in and day out that are willing to lie to the court, lie to counsel, whatever it takes to remain free. I even to some extent understand the impulse. I think the worst lie that one tells would be the one they tell themselves when they're unable to accept the consequences of their own actions. But here we are. So the state in this situation would recommend a 5 years fixed and imposed plus 25 indeterminate. In speaking to the victim, the state would request that the NCO, the no contact order, be extended to 35 years. The state would request 30 days to file a motion for costs, but at this time, I'll say for additional costs, because at this time the state would request an order for $2,000 for the cost of the psychosexual and other sentencing evaluations that we have received at this point. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
No, I said thank you. That's it. Thank you. Mr. Gustavus, I'll give you a chance again if you wish to make any argument on behalf of the client.
Regarding the request for costs on the psychosexual evaluation, that is a cost of the pre-sentence investigation, Your Honor. That's mandatory. That's a court-ordered evaluation, and Mr. Cady is indigent, so he should not be held to pay for that evaluation. Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Gustavus?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Cady, I'm also required to ask you again before I impose sentence. I'll give you the chance to address the court. You are not required to say anything, nor do I hold it against you in any way if you choose not to. However, if you do wish to exercise your right of allocution, which gives you the chance to make a statement on your own behalf or present any information in mitigation on the punishment of this crime, I'll give you that chance. Is there anything you'd like to say, sir?
No.
All right. Are you satisfied with the representation of your attorney up to this point?
No.
Is there any counsel, is there any legal reason why I should not sentence the defendant today?
No.
Okay. Would note that Mr. Cady has continued to maintain his innocence. However, based upon the verdict of the jury, it is the judgment of this court that you are guilty of the crime of lewd conduct with a minor under the age of 16. I have carefully reviewed the record in this matter. I have reviewed both the pre-sentence investigation report as well as the psychosexual evaluation. I have listened to the statements of the victim impact statements that were given. I was the judge and also that conducted the trial. I listened to the state and have considered the objectives of criminal sentencing adopted by the Idaho Supreme Court. Those objectives this court must consider. That's of the case of the state versus Toohill. In that case, I must consider protection of society, deterrence, rehabilitation, and punishment. I've also carefully considered the criteria out of Code 1925-21 relative to the question whether I should place you on probation or confine you to prison. In this case, this court, even though the defense has chosen not to present mitigating factors, the court has done so, and I will make comments on those both aggravating and mitigating factors in this case. Perhaps I'm going to address the aggravating factors first. Both the victim impact statements of mother and the victim in this case talked about stolen innocence. That's exactly what this case is about, in the fact that Mr. Cady stole the innocence of a 13-year-old girl in a way that he took advantage, or Mr. Cady took advantage of the victim in this case in a sexual manner, and that those actions have caused consequences. Consequences both to the family. They talk about how kindness has become a weakness. They felt that they were being kind to you and that you took advantage of that kindness and sexually assaulted their 13-year-old daughter. The jury listened to the evidence and found you guilty of the crime. I recognize the comments that you have made, both on the stand and in the psychosexual evaluation, as well as the pre-sentence investigation report, that you weren't aware that she was doing these things and that you were unaware, and then when she grabbed your penis, that you brushed it off and tried not to deal with that. The fact of the matter is, even if that were to happen, you didn't handle things appropriately. In that case, you should have handled it differently than you did, and you chose not to. Of concern to this court, like I said, I think the victims as well have touched on the trauma and the effect on their life. The court has to consider that, as well as have to consider the protection of society. In the pre-sentence investigation report, it talks about, I'm going to read the paragraph on page 10 of that report. It says, Mr. Cady was interviewed on July 1st at the Bonneville County Jail, was upset about the outcome of the jury trial, felt that all items of evidence proving my innocence were not presented. Mr. Cady focused on how unfair the trial was and his lack of participation in sexual acts towards the victim. In the psychosexual report, it indicated that the amenability for treatment was very poor. Mr. Cady perceives himself to be the victim in this case, which is consistent with this self-report regarding prior failed intimate relationships. Since it is unlikely he will effectively engage in the treatment recommended, that avenue of reducing his risk of reoffense appears to be closed at this time. The victim has suffered from lack of self-worth, loss of innocence, and trust in relationships. She hopes to one day heal from the trauma, however, stated, I will never forget. The defendant's lack of accountability combined with his anger and frustration over the situation creates cause for concern or the risk he presents to others and his ability to be supervised effectively. Therefore, we respectfully recommend the defendant be sentenced to a term of incarceration with the Department of Corrections. So the pre-sentence investigator recommends incarceration. The state has recommended a series of incarceration either. Would note in this Mr. Cady a lack of much of a criminal history. There have been some minor offenses. Would note that it appears that the only conviction prior to this was a charge out of Nevada, which was a misdemeanor. Everything else, I think this is your first felony other than that, at least from my reading of the prior record comments. The court only considers that, and so really this would be a first offense. We'd also note that in reviewing the psychosexual evaluation that you passed the polygraph examinations. There was 2 of those, and that it showed that when asked the questions, and I read through the detailed questions that were asked, that you passed those polygraph examinations. The court, however, is required to consider the verdict of the jury in this case, where a jury of 12 found you guilty of the crime. So then the court has to consider protection of society and your rehabilitation. Of concern as to that, on page 19 of the psychosexual evaluation, it says this conviction appears to be the product of a pattern of sorts in Mr. Cady's life, wherein he attempts to help women with various problems and ends up being victimized by them from his perspective. On page 24 of the psychosexual evaluation are the comments where it talks about a moderate risk level, and ultimately on page 25 where it talks about treatment. It says Mr. Cady is likely to be a very challenging client for treatment. For treatment providers regarding sexual offender treatment as noted above. He displays a high level of interpersonal dominance and anger frustration at the present time. The undersigned anticipates that successful treatment could only occur in a setting in which the treatment provider builds a strong therapeutic relationship with him prior to moving forward. Mr. Cady's perception and understanding of himself is essentially a virtuous person who gets in trouble because of his well-intentioned actions, while possible, appears to be largely productive of personality disorder traits. As such, he'll require a high degree of supervision of the community and will be a very challenging individual to supervise. This may change if he engages in treatment and the symptoms of depression are in remission. However, this seems unlikely at the present time. So based on all these factors and considering what it is the court should do in this case, it's going to be the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to the custody of the Department of Corrections as follows.
Your Honor,
Yes, Mr. Harris.
I apologize for
Go ahead.
the interruption. I just thought that prior to that, I did note there was an error in the PSI that
Where?
on page 6.
What is it?
At accommodation, the last bullet point says defendant has been in custody at Bonneville County Jail since May 12th of 2023. I reviewed that. I believe that that is an error. It would have been May 15th of 2024. I think prior to that time he was released.
Okay.
In custody.
We'll go ahead and make that correction. Mr. Cady will ultimately given the credit time for time served, because I know he was both in and out and released. He will be given the credit based upon that. And Mr. Cady, just so you know, if there, once you get those records, if it's not an accurate account, you can contact Mr. Gustavus and he can file a motion with this court if those dates are not appropriately given to you.
The defense counsel would concur with what the state has pointed out. He was arrested and posted bond, so he had credit for time of 1 day. He was then taken into custody after the trial. So,
Okay. Appreciate that. Anything else, Mr. Harris?
No, Your Honor.
All right. So based on all these factors, and considering the criteria we've already set forth in this case, given the judgment of this court, should be sentenced to custody out of the Department of Corrections as follows: for a minimum term of 10 years, followed by an indeterminate term of 30 years for a total of 40 years. I'm going to order a fine in this case of $1,000. Standard court costs, payments into the Victims Relief Fund. I do find that you're indigent. However, the court then, based on that, will not order the $2,000 restitution, as I don't think, based on the sentence I've given you, that you're going to be in a position to make those payments. I am, however, going to order reimbursement of the County Public Defender Service amount of $500, as I believe that that is something that you will eventually may be able to repay. I will also order that you register as a sex offender upon your release pursuant to Idaho Code 188307. And I extend a no contact order for a period of 40 years, which is the sentence that I've given in this case. You'll have no contact with the family or specifically the victim in this case. We'll give you credit for the time that you've served up to now. Your counsel's indicated, I believe that was approximately 100 days. Has indicated if those dates aren't correct, once you receive those times, you can ask to have that corrected in this court. Let me advise you have the right to appeal. You have a Supreme Court from this judgment conviction. You have a right to be represented by an attorney in that appeal. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you public expense. However, you only have 42 days for the days date to file that. You also have the right to seek relief under Idaho Criminal Rule 35 if you feel the sentence was illegal or unduly harsh. You have 120 days for that. You also have the right to seek relief under the Idaho Uniform Post-Conviction Relief Act. Such an action must be filed within 1 year from the date that your right to appeal expires. I'm also going to order the collection of a DNA sample and a right thumbprint consistent with Idaho Code. If you have any questions about those rights, speak with Mr. Gustavus. You can also do that. But if you have any questions, sir, about your rights as far as your right to appeal or post-conviction. All right. Anything else to do on this matter, Mr. Gustavus?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Harris?
No, Your Honor.
We're going to order the collection of the pre-sentence investigation report, so that will be in recess on this matter. Parties may be excused.